I was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of creamy chicken Alfredo, the smell of garlic and butter swirling in the kitchen air. The gentle simmer of the sauce, the sound of noodles boiling behind me. It was the kind of evening I always looked forward to after a long day. Cooking brought me peace. It made this house feel like a home. After marrying Daniel 2 years ago, I knew stepping into the role of stepmom to his 12-year-old son, Noah, wouldn't always be easy. But I loved them both, and I was willing to put in the work. Noah was a quiet kid. Not cold exactly, but reserved. He had his mother's soft, observant eyes, and he watched everything from a slight distance. For the first 6 months after Daniel and I got married, Noah barely said a word to me unless it was necessary. I didn't take it personally. I knew he was still grieving in his own way. His mom, Melissa, had passed away 3 years ago after a long battle with cancer, and Daniel had been doing everything in his power to keep things normal for Noah. When I came into their lives, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't try to replace his mother. I'd just try to be there, steady and kind, if and when he needed me. That evening was quiet. The television hummed faintly from the living room, and I could hear the rhythmic tapping of video game buttons coming from the couch. Noah usually came to the kitchen to grab a drink or ask how much longer dinner would take. But this time, I heard his footsteps pause behind me. I turned slightly, smiling as I saw him standing there with his arms folded, looking up at me with those wide, thoughtful eyes. "Hey, Noah," I said gently, switching the burner to low. "You hungry?" He nodded slowly, then stepped closer. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated. I could see it. Whatever he wanted to say was something he'd been holding on to for a while. He bit his bottom lip, then looked up at me again. "Would it be okay if I called you Mom?" The world stood still. The sound of a simmering pot faded. The clink of the spoon I'd set down didn't register. I just looked at him, heart swelling with emotion I hadn't prepared for. I hadn't dared to hope he'd ever want that. I never brought it up, never pressured him, never hinted. But hearing him ask me that, was like a wave crashing over every quiet doubt I had felt since marrying Daniel. I knelt in front of him, eyes starting to blur. "You really want to?" I asked quietly, my voice trembling. He nodded again, this time more confidently. "I think you're already like one. I just didn't know if it was okay." I reached forward and wrapped my arms around him, holding him close as tears slipped down my cheeks. "Of course it's okay," I whispered into his shoulder. "I would be honored." From the doorway, Daniel had appeared, and when I glanced up, I saw the emotion in his eyes too. He didn't say anything, just walked over and placed his hand gently on Noah's back, his other hand squeezing my shoulder. That evening, dinner tasted different. Warmer, fuller, like the whole house was filled with something new and unspoken. Noah sat next to me instead of across, and every now and then, he'd glance at me and smile. It wasn't just about a word. It was about a bond we had been building brick by brick, day by day. That night, I helped him with his homework. We sat at the kitchen table while Daniel did dishes, and for the first time, Noah leaned his head against my shoulder when he got tired. It wasn't long after that when he started introducing me as his mom to his friends. The first time I heard it at school pickup, I almost cried again. But I kept it together. I smiled, nodded at his friends, and gave him a wink when no one was looking. Over the next few months, things continued to evolve. There were ups and downs, of course. He still missed his mother terribly. There were nights when he would go quiet, looking out the window with a far-off look in his eyes. Once, during one of our evening walks around the neighborhood, he said, "Do you think my real mom would be okay with this?" I stopped and crouched beside him. "I think she'd be proud of you. And I think she'd be grateful that you have so many people who love you. You don't have to forget her to make space for more love." He nodded, and for the rest of the walk, he held my hand. Daniel and I started planning a family trip to the Grand Canyon for the summer. It would be our first big vacation together, and we wanted it to be special. Noah was excited in his own quiet way. He made a list of places to stop on the drive, what snacks to bring, even what kind of songs we should play. One evening, while packing in his room, he found an old photo album. He brought it downstairs, sitting between me and Daniel on the couch. Page by page, we flipped through pictures of him as a baby, family outings, birthdays. When a photo of his mom came up, her arms wrapped around baby Noah, her smile full of light, he pointed at it and said softly, "I remember her voice." I wrapped my arm around his shoulder, pulling him close. "She had a beautiful voice." "She did," he said, smiling. "But you do too." The trip was everything we hoped it would be. We hiked, laughed, and made s'mores under the stars. One night, around the campfire, Noah leaned back against me and said, "I think this is what having a family is supposed to feel like." And I realized, no matter how things started or how much pain came before, healing was possible. Love wasn't about replacing someone, it was about adding to what was already there. Daniel squeezed my hand across the fire, and we both smiled at the boy who had found his voice and had given me one of the greatest honors of my life. When we returned home, life settled back into its rhythm. School, work, dinners, movie nights. But something was different. There was a warmth that wrapped around us like a blanket. We didn't talk about that night in the kitchen too often, but it became the quiet center of our relationship. And every time he said, "Mom," I remembered the way my heart stopped that evening. The way I dropped everything and just listened. The way love asked me a question, and I could not and would not say no.